I do love these days, Jeff. This is like, I get on stage and all these fine people from ad tech are sitting in front of us waiting for something amazing to happen. No pressure, no pressure. Anyway, first of all, thank you for doing this today. I know you're a very busy man. You're a CEO of a $50 billion company. You have a bigger entourage than people I employ, so it's just great to have you here at the show. What a time to have you come on stage. Probably the most pivotal year we've seen in ad tech in ever, really.
I think so.
So we might as well just jump straight into it. Like, so the industry's in complete flux. We have privacy issues. We have cookie deprecation. We have a massive seismic trial happening right now in parallel with this event this week. So I want to talk to you about like how a company like the Trade Desk navigates that and how other companies should be thinking about navigating this sort of like the mire of booby traps.
Yeah, I mean, for us, as simple as it sounds and as fundamental as it sounds, we haven't really changed much. I mean, a lot of people sometimes have asked how we've managed to not pivot our business again and again. And I think one of the reasons why many ad tech companies have failed is that they pivoted again and again, and they sort of follow the flavor of the month. And I mean, the business plan that we wrote 15 years ago is the exact same thing that we're executing today. We still look at the North Stars of things like price discovery and competitive markets and things like that. And we're still doing exactly the same thing that we did back then. So figuring out what your niche is, what your goal is, and then sticking to it doesn't mean that you don't have to ask yourself every day, what am I wrong about and what things do I need to change? But on the big things, we just kept saying, hey, we're still right about this, and let's keep going.
Yeah. So just digging into that, I always think the thesis of a good company is just doing it and doing really well and iterating on that. I think you're right. A lot of companies have kind of made the mistake of trying to do everything instead of doing one thing really well. And I think that's like, when we first met, I remember this is going to make you laugh. I actually told Jeff he was too late to the DSP party. How fucking wrong could one man be? A 50 billion
You weren't the only
there,
one.
Yeah. But
He's one of the few to admit it, though. There's so many people on Sand Hill Road that are like, I knew it was going to work. And there's so many people I've encountered that told me at the time this will never work, and now say I knew it was going to work.
To be fair to me, there was like 10 DSPs at that stage, including Invite. Like Invite had
we had less funding than all the rest of them.
Yeah. So why did you win? I'm just curious. What did you do right that we did wrong?
Well, I think there's a couple things that we did right. One, we never declared war on the agencies. Like a bunch of DSPs were challenging agencies, and we always looked at them as allies. We still look at them as allies. They're really critical partners. And we think that people underestimated, especially their staying power. So partnering with agencies. Another, and I had this debate with a lot of people in ad tech, trying to be both buy side and sell side. I think that's doomed. Yeah. Even in Google's case. To me, at the core of the case that is going on right now is them being buy side,
buy side, sell side, and everything in between.
And everything in between.
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So the fact that we just focus on the buy side made it easier for us to partner with.
And I suppose the other thing that you did really well was you championed sort of the open internet, and sort of that segues nicely into the next question around this sort of evolution of the open internet. Like, you've always been an advocate, like when you're on TV, when you're on stage, you talk about the importance of an open internet, the importance of a free press, the importance of sort of oxygenating these sites that kind of give civil society sort of the basis to work in a good country every day. But you now have sort of had an evolution of that idea. I want to talk about this premium open internet versus the open internet, which you sort of started talking about.
Yeah, so I'm so glad we get to talk about this, because a lot of people have suggested that, the Trade Desk has pivoted. They're now talking about the premium internet instead of the open internet, as if those are different things. And that's not the way that I look at it. I sometimes use the analogy of like bowling pins, where the pin at the very front is called the king pin, and I think the kingpin is the premium content of the open internet. So there are hundreds of thousands of sites and destinations, but the way that you shape the open internet is really determined by the premium parts of the internet. And to me, those are three categories. One is CTV, or the premium content of television. The second is audio, and the premium content of audio. All of those companies, including especially Pandora and Spotify, need an open internet, need digital ads. They themselves have gone head to head with Apple. Sort of in the audio world, it's more Apple. In the rest of ads, it's of course Google that you have to worry about, and they've done their part in fighting for the open internet. But then there's the one that arguably plays the most important role for society, even though we all love the premium content of CTV and music, and that's journalism. So hundreds, thousands across the world, but hundreds in the United States have gone out of business in the last few years, simply because of the fact that Facebook and Google have essentially abandoned them. They used to be the primary support for journalism and providing ads for them. And admittedly, journalistic outlets have done a pretty bad job of transitioning to the internet. They've always had sort of a mindset of, if we just do our job and focus on great journalism, that the revenue will take care of itself. And that's not a good way to live. But when you combine the power of Google and Facebook and Apple, that's really put them under fire. So if we take care of those three, we think the rest of the open internet, just like the kingpin in bowling, will take care of itself. And so we talk about the premium internet because that is how that goes the rest of the open internet.
Yeah, but you got blowback from certain people around you being the arbiters of deciding what the premium internet is versus what the market should. How do you respond to that? Because I feel that, because you partner with Sincera to some, and I was like, I know the Sincera guys pretty well, and I felt the Trade Desk got a bit of a bad rap because anybody could use Sincera, right? Like, effectively what the Trade Desk was doing was curating the best parts of the open internet. Let's be honest, most of the open internet is dog shit, right? It's no offense, like, but Shakespeare websites and crap like that, like, no one, and MFA, come on, let's call a spade here, and absolute garbage. But there's chunks of the open internet which have value. So, I mean, how do you sort of push back against those sort of concerns from certain quarters?
Honestly, I don't sweat it too much. I was actually, to be honest, totally blown away by how many people, especially parts of the premium open internet, and the biggest names in TV, which I respect all of them, but how many of them, a day or two after we published the sellers and publishers list in the Global 100, were like, I can't believe we're only number 6. This is bullshit. And I'm like, I didn't think anybody would care.
Do you get any calls going, how do I become number 2?
Yeah, yes, that's a lot of questions around that. And to me, the more we were discussing, is this more premium than that?
Right.
The better. Because no one was saying, you know what, I think YouTube is more premium than Paramount. They weren't. And no one was discussing, oh, I think YouTube is more premium than Spotify.
Yeah.
Like, we were all discussing how premium is premium. And the reason why everyone was passionate was either because they had a dog in the hunt and they owned that, and they thought we are the best, or because of the content that they love. And the fact that we were creating discussion around the content that people love was underscoring our very point, which is that the open internet has the very best of media. All the stuff we love is on the open internet.
But you weren't telling people you have to buy this. It's a subjective thing. If a holding group said to you, I'm going to buy all this stuff, including the public, like that's the part. It's almost you were accused of being, this is now the open or premium internet. You must do this, and I was like, "Oh no, that's not how it works." Like,
no, you buy what you want. We were just highlighting. We're essentially putting together an ad or a brochure for the open internet. We're saying, here's some of the best. And the fact that some were like, we should be on that list, well, let's promote it. Let's talk about how you can be better. and then some that were on the list that wanted to be higher on the list. Well, let's talk about how you can be better. All of those discussions, to me, are healthy, but it underscored our very point, which is that the best of the internet is in the open internet. And that we need to take very seriously how significant the collection of that is. Because that's where I don't think we've had enough discussion. We've said, oh my God, it's a must-buy to be on YouTube. It's a must-buy to be on Facebook. Nobody can compete with that size and scale. But you put that list together and you immediately say, oh my God, this is bigger than any walled garden. This collection is bigger than any walled garden. And if you had to go a life without music and television, or you had to go a life without YouTube, it's not a hard decision.
Yeah. Well, what about sort of the comparisons to Google, which I find a bit ridiculous, but like you get people who compare, like, is the Trade Desk the new Google? I'm going, no, it doesn't have an ad server. No, it doesn't have the sales.
A space program.
Yeah. I mean, do you laugh or do you get annoyed by those type of things, or like what's your reaction to that?
So when Sundar first compared us and said that he viewed us as a competitor, I was incredibly flattered. And I've joked that even in David and Goliath, David was at least 30 or 40% of the size of Goliath. This is more like David and the ant or something like that, in the sense that we're 2% of Google's market cap on any given day. 2%. So when he made that comparison, I was flattered because I view Google and Apple not only as the most powerful companies in the history of the world, but also as the most successful. So the fact that they view us as a threat is fantastic and flattering, and it's just, I can't think of a better word than flattering. The places where I get really offended or upset is when people say that our behaviors are like Google's, because they are not, and they also underestimate what we're doing. So sometimes people will say things like, well, the Trade Desk is now throwing its weight around, like in making a list of the Global 100. Who are they to make a list?
It's just a bloody list.
It's exactly.
I'll tell you what, I'll make a list up next week and get people
That's
check.
right.
I actually have the Ciarán 100. It's class.
Exactly.
It's not brand safe, but it's all right. I mean, DV and IS will have a meltdown, in fairness. He'll never serve an ad across some of the content. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
No, it's all good. But what we're really trying to do, and what we've always been trying to do, is get enough influence, and I guess you can say power, to affect the ecosystem for the better. And so when people say, oh, the Trade Desk made this move and it benefits them. Well, yeah, it does. Most companies are in the business of trying to do better than they did yesterday. But also, don't we benefit other people in the ecosystem? And what we've tried to do is make it so that our ecosystem is full of win-wins. We can't do anything in a fair market where there isn't a win-win. The definition of sustainability, I think, is that you provide more value than you extract. That's always been our philosophy. So, I sometimes joke, the shorthand is, Frodo wasn't an asshole simply because he took the ring all the way to Mordor. And the fact that he hung on to the ring is not a flaw in his character. And nobody writes their senator and says, please do nothing. Instead, you're saying, please do something good. You have the power to have influence. Please do something with that. And what I'm pleading with our team to do all the time is, hey, we're in this position where we have more power than we thought we would in the open internet. Now let's make it better. Let's improve the world. Let's improve the ecosystem. Let's make it so others can win too. But what Google, I believe, has done, and what I think we've seen as they've been on trial, is that every turn when they had power and influence, they said, what's in our best interest, and to hell with everyone else.
I mean, I actually was told something this morning that I'll bring up in the next panel, and it is blow your bloody mind what they're doing. Anyway, that's for another panel. But think about the encroachment. You talk about the demarcation between buy and sell side, right? There was a story around a TV project you're working on, right? That made people go, "Oh, are you encroaching on Roku or somebody else's territory?" I suppose maybe people talk about UID2 and they think, "Oh, you're encroaching on LiveRam's territory." Is that where that's coming from? Because I think that you're right to sort of to frame this as like you're trying to build your business, but it's not. It shouldn't be compared to some of the stuff that Google is doing, which is incredibly monopolistic. It's just a natural evolution of the space.
Yeah, I think the mistake that Google has made, and I think the mistake that many companies in ad tech have made, is they've tried to be the player. I'll call it the offensive player, the one with the ball, the referee, and the defensive player. They've tried to be all three. Or if you prefer the courtroom, a prosecutor, defense attorney, and the judge and jury, where you run the auction, you represent the sell side, you represent the buy side. We've focused on representing the buy side, and by doing that, we believe you have to play fairly, and you have to recognize there are other players in the ecosystem that are trying to play their role. I think it's a mistake for anybody to try to be all three of those. Even though in some cases, like in Google, Apple, Facebook, and to some extent Amazon, you can try and you can get there for a while, but then eventually you run into problems. And in some ways, your own success breeds a whole bunch of dilemma. We've said we are always on the buy side. We will always be on the buy side. We will never own content. And I don't look at LiveRamp as a competitor. I look at them as a partner. I don't look at Roku as a competitor. I look at them as a partner.
So are they wrong about the TV story? Is it something completely different, or like?
Yeah, so they are wrong.
Right.
They are wrong.
Right.
And you can see that in our partnership with Roku. So it doesn't mean that we don't have to obsess about supply chains.
Yeah.
We do. And we have to make certain that the supply chain of the open internet is better than that of walled gardens. And that is one thing that walled gardens have going for them, is that by controlling the whole supply chain, you can make it short. That is, I would say, the way Amazon became successful, is Jeff Bezos obsessed about supply chains. So we do have to obsess about that while never leaving the buy-side only mantra, where we do not want to own content, because the way we've competed with Google is we've said we are going to objectively buy the internet, so we don't care if we buy Yahoo or Hulu. We just want to objectively figure out on behalf of Nike which one to buy. If we lose that objectivity, we think we lose the very best of what we have. And the fact that many of the most premium content providers in the world in audio and CTV have come to us and said, what if we gave you all of our content? Could you monetize it better? Because understandably, many of them don't want to be in ads. They're like, that's too confusing. Keep us out of it.
Just cut me a check
Just cut me a check.
at the end of the quarter.
And in every case, we've said we never want to own it. Even though you have some of the most premium content in the world, it will compromise our objectivity, and we're not willing to compromise our objectivity. So if we can say no to the most premium content in the world, why would we ever go to try to create it? Or why would we say no to or say yes to the 10th biggest or the 50th?
Yeah. We're shifting gears here, because I want to talk about the DOJ trial, because we have to talk about it.
Sure.
I'll be talking about this all day. I've been predicting it for 10 years. Now it's my day, my week.
You timed this event very well,
I mean,
by the way.
I timed it 14 years. I knew this would happen today, so it's fine. Just talk about from your point of view. What do you think are the best remedies for the industry? What I mean, there's probably the trade desk view and one for the industry. What do you think should happen, right? Because I think Google are teeing up the Hive Off, AdX, and GAM. I'm got enough evidence now to put together a good rumor, not a story because I have no sources. Put a good rumor together that would be believable after a couple of pints. But I want to get your opinion as to what should happen and what needs to happen.
Yeah. So first of all, let me just frame the conversation. Tragically, as an industry, whenever we have a conversation, we have to start by defining words. That's how bad we've done as an industry at creating acronyms and words that mean different things to all of us. By the way, the biggest defense that Google has in this trial is complexity. And by the way, they're trying to use that to their advantage by especially leaning on their own complexity, or the complexity that they created, because AdSense has been renamed 14 times, from GAM to PMax to like just so many things that
You literally need a degree to keep up with all these.
Yeah, oh yeah, or a secret like decoder ring or something. But I think it's important to step outside of the words that they've created and the nuance that often contradicts each other and is full of bullshit, and instead to just talk about it in common terms. They have represented, they have been the prosecuting attorney, the defense attorney, and the judge and jury. The remedy is to say you have to quit at least one of those jobs. You can't be all three. And the one that makes the least amount of money is judge and jury. And it does that in every forum. We use the sports analogy. The refs make the least amount of money. So they may decide to get out of the AdX business for that very reason. But they may also choose to get out of the sell side in the sense that they're representing sellers other than themselves. Because they should strategically just focus on monetizing Google.com and YouTube. That's what's in their best interest because their cost of goods sold is essentially zero. But if they were to do that, then the monetizing of other websites would go away. And then you have to figure out what to do with DFP, which I do think is what is really going to be discussed about spinning out. It's going to be extremely difficult because it's so integrated. The second they bought DoubleClick, they began rewriting it and made it fully integrated. So it will take a bunch of work for them to do that. But in the simplest terms, they need to get out of one of those businesses, and it's most likely going to be the sell side.
So that you think that's where it's most logical to happen. So just want to shift gears again, and we are going to talk a bit more about the DOJ trial later on. So I want to talk about your focus in CTV, right? That's been probably the foundation of the huge success that the trade desk has seen over the last couple of years. How has that success been achieved? Why the focus on CTV? And obviously the obvious sort of macro trends around changing consumer habits, etc. But like, it's a big old beast to try and take on a very traditional industry like TV, so entrenched in sort of its sort of antiquated measurement and targeting and all the rest of it. But so I just want to talk about that for a couple of minutes and talk about your approach to it and where you see that going as we move into sort of this shift.
Yeah, so to me, global advertising is almost $1 trillion industry today. About half of that around the world is spent in some form of premium video or premium audio. And premium video, I think, will represent about half of it on its own. Premium audio still doesn't get its fair share. I think there's so much to come in audio, and there's so much potential there as well. But you know, when we talk about Google and ads, I think you can make the argument that Google doesn't make its money in ads, that they're not really in advertising. And it just depends on, we're back to defining words, what the definition of advertising is to you. And to me, it's the winning of hearts and minds. It's this dialogue between a business and their customers or potential customers. And they make you want to feel something. Nothing is more effective at making you want to feel something than moving picture and sound as it relates to ads. And so it's because of the effectiveness of video ads, and we saw that with programmatic, where you can personalize those, that this really has the potential to be the most effective advertising at scale, potentially in the history of the world. And that what Google does is actually navigation. After you've done advertising and you've won the hearts and minds, and you type in buy iPhone, they're charging you for that, which is navigation, but the work has already been done to win hearts and minds. And who doesn't want more of those, more people typing in buy iPhone? And so they've created an unbelievable product. I think it's an amazing machine for both information and for navigation, or a navigation form of advertising. But the heavy lifting is done more up funnel, where you're trying to win hearts and minds. And we just viewed CTV as the most effective place to do that. So let's go there. And yes, it will come with problems, measurement, legacy. And the first people that we talked about with it were like, this will never happen. 20 years, maybe.
They made the same mistake I did, Jeff. Let's be honest. Doubting you, the ghost.
Understandably, it's a very big industry that didn't want to change. But I looked at CTV and said, this one's being driven by consumers, and that's different than anything programmatic had ever seen before. Because when you think about like running an auction on priority 7 in DFP on display ads at the bottom of the page, that actually an auction is not the best way to monetize that inventory. The best way to, or the best time to use an auction is when you have more demand for that inventory. So the premium stuff is most prone to an auction and what should have been auctioned. And that is part of the reason why the premium internet is so important to the open internet and to programmatic, because that is the place where an auction belongs most. And the premium stuff in CTV and audio are where that belongs.
It's a nice. So that I want to talk quickly about cookie deprecation and consequences for the industry and some of the stuff that you're working on. So let's talk about that. You said it would never happen. A lot of us thought that as well. But where does that leave the industry right now? Like, it feels to me like we're sitting waiting for someone to make up their mind who can never make up their mind because they're busy looking at other stuff. Like so.
Yeah, I'm also glad we're talking about this because I think it's really important that everyone in the room have a plan. And I've said before, every advertiser needs to have an identity plan, and every publisher needs to have an identity plan and an authentication plan. Authentication being getting people to log in. So unless you're in CTV or audio, where 100% of your users are logged in, you have to be thinking about how do I get logins or make it easy for people to log in so that you can provide personalization. Part of the reason why that authentication strategy is important is because going back to like how powerful Google and Apple have become. In some ways, you can blame Wall Street for having created these monsters in Google and Apple, because those two companies are graded as growth companies. And they're massive, and they're being asked to grow. And so the reason they have to be draconian and make policies where they have to eat the whole pie, if you will, is because at their scale, the only way they can continue growth rates like they've put up in the past is to grow and take all of it. They need to take all of it. So the thing to me that is so concerning about the discussion around identity is that both of them have the most significant single sign-ons in the world with Apple and Google. And Apple has been using it to tax advertising without getting into advertising for a long time. So it makes sense to me that as they're graded on growth and they're saying, okay, we've got to do things worldwide and to as many people or as many sites as possible, we essentially have to control the internet. That they will look for an opportunity to own authentication. And what we've been trying to say is the relationship between a media company or a newspaper or journalistic outlet and their consumer is sacred. They should have one directly between them. And that's why we created UID2 and OpenPass so that this could live outside of Google and Apple. And if you pin somebody's preferences to the most benign piece of PII possible, then you can make that live outside of the control of Google and Apple, which is critical to the open internet. So I'm worried that people look at the delay of the deprecation of cookies and say, oh, we have more time to live. Oh, nothing to do here. Oh, good, now I don't have to do anything. If that's your reaction, you're in trouble because they're still coming for you. It's just the privacy pressure on them as well as the antitrust pressure on them made them say, we didn't create cookies. We can delay this and say it wasn't us. And so I don't believe that was because they were trying to help you out. And I don't think that any of us should have a strategy that is, oh, I bet Google will look out for me in the long run. I just don't think that's a good strategy.
I mean, let's be honest, that's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Google don't really care about us. One last question. I mean, I was given 12 questions here, Jeff. I literally would need an hour and a half with you on the stage because there's so much to talk about. But it would be amiss of me not to take this opportunity to talk about independent ad tech, as Rachel talked about before this sit down. You're like, you are the standard bearer of ad tech. You are the greatest of all time in my book. You are. Like, Boris was smarter, in fairness. Boris from IPWeb, he's the smartest. Maybe a few more commercially minded people, but you are the ultimate mix. You've taken a company to, to be able to compete with Google. There's not many people that could take a punch at Google, right? I do, but it's like me, like, kicking someone's heels. I'm just a little guy, right? You know what I mean? Like, what difference? Google just don't give a shit about me. But you go publicly, go toe-to-toe them, which is impressive, and that's why I admire you guys so much, because you're the only company who could do it.
Thank you.
So the question for you is, where do you see the health of independent ad? We're at this crossroads that could change the industry completely. If, let's say, the DOJ goes really, really hard and demands that Google split out DFP and AdX, split them out completely, the ad server market gets completely regenerated. But I want to talk about independent ad tech. Where do you see it now? What do you see the opportunities for this space?
So I think no matter what happens in the trial, things are going to be better for the open internet going forward. And whether it's because Google's afraid of having to go through this again, even if they won. I mean, the CMA is watching. There are regulators all over the world watching this, and they're not done yet. So I do believe that Google's behavior is going to change, and the market will get fairer. It may not be totally fair, but it will get fairer. And I've always said the trade desk managed to win in an unfair market. Imagine what we could do in a fair market. But also, this is a $1 trillion industry. There is so much opportunity in this space.
There's always money to be made in this.
Always. And as a market changes, what happens is big companies are slower to move and change, and that creates room for smaller companies. I believe there's more opportunity for smaller companies than there's ever been before. The global financial crisis made it so that venture capitalists sat on the sidelines, and then they infused a bunch of money into all the DSPs all at once, right afterwards. But that was when it was very nascent, and since then, there hasn't been nearly as much investment in independent ad tech, and there should be more.
Why do you think that's the case?
I think it's because there were enough venture capitalists that lost. But I also think it's because our space is extremely complicated.
Yeah, I always think that venture capitalists who invest in ad tech don't know when to win and don't know when to lose. So they're angry because they don't know why they lost or won.
Exactly. And there's so many big companies. Like, I always wondered why Salesforce never got in this space. And I knew the corp dev teams well, and I would always ask them. And they said, it's because your space is so complicated. Every time we make a list of all the things to go buy, we're like, this one I get, and this one will make money. Your space, I don't know. And so many companies and venture capitalists have passed over it because of its complexity.
Does that then sort of support the idea that ad tech needs to be independent? It can't be owned by. It can't be just an add-on. It needs to be independent because we're like sort of, you just alluded to it, right? $1 trillion business, but we're the glue that glues all those bits and pieces together. So there has to be some level of independence there, and that's the way it should be.
Yeah, I do think that lots of ad tech, the majority of it will be independent, but there are lots of ways that it can be an ancillary business. I mean, we didn't talk about retail media or retail companies getting into ad tech. They're a critical component, and it's not because their primary business is ad tech. It's an ancillary business to them running a retail shop, and if they're not doing it, I believe their core business is at risk. So I think it's actually, it depends on the industry, it depends on the company, but more and more companies will be in advertising. Some will be full-time, and that's where independent ad tech is in play, and some will be part-time, which is where retailers are, for instance. But even companies like content owners, whether it's journalism, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Netflix, ads are a part-time job for them. They're in the business of making amazing content that the world wants and needs. So having it as a part-time job is fine too. We just need to make it possible for so many different types of companies to participate. And that's why we've been arguing forever. We just want a fair market. We think we can win in a fair market. And that's what I don't understand about big tech in the abstract, is why haven't they said, we're so big, of course we can win. We're fine with a fair market. Why did they have to cheat?
Because they have to maintain the
Their
illusion,
growth.
the illusion of growth. And let's be honest, both I think Google and Facebook have flagged that they're going to start paying dividends, which suggests that the growth story is about to end. Jeff, I better wrap up. 5 minutes over. I really appreciate your time. I could sit here for hours and chat. We didn't even touch on the retail stuff. We can do it again, maybe next year or the year after.
Let's do it again.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. Ladies and gentlemen, Jeff Green, round of applause, please.